Hey everyone. In this video, I'm going to cover what happened at the TDSB board meeting on May 22nd, 2019 at 7 p.m. But before I go into specifics, I'm going to cover some basics and thoughts about trustees and the board. So as stated at the meeting, the TDSB is the largest and most diverse board in the country, and the public is represented by a trustee elected from their community. A trustee's job is to advocate for their community's education and assist the board in fulfilling their duties under the Education Act. Their role is to maintain a focus on student achievement, well-being, and equity, and they are the middle person between their community and the board for messages and decisions. Onto the meeting itself. It lasted roughly 3 hours with minimal interruptions, covering a wide variety of topics, and was run by the chair. And I literally mean everything went through this person, like all decisions, all motions, all comments had to be recognized, except for a section when she was more involved in the motion or process and the vice chair took over. Robin Pilkey is the chair's name. As trustees speak, they stand up, but one issue was the mics aren't really close enough to the person when they're standing, so this was a problematic setup, and I think could have been done better, or I don't know really why they're standing, because it makes it difficult to hear what's going on. To cast their votes, they use an app on tablets known as eScribe, which simplifies the process. Basically, it makes it so that you see the motion, they give a time period, all the people vote, the poll closes, and then you get to see the results. There's also transparency on how many people voted yes and how many people voted no. As the meeting started, I noticed some interesting and disappointing things happening, such as the meeting started without all the trustees in the room, which is problematic to me because a community is not being represented. And also, a lot of people were sitting down during the land acknowledgement. This was a shock to me because a meeting of this magnitude, with it being filmed and having public, people of the public there, it shows a lot of disrespect towards First Nations people, which we're being taught and trying to change and really incorporate in schools. It shows that people still read land acknowledgements just because they have to, and not that they're, not using them for what they're really intended for. I was also very surprised to see throughout the meeting that several trustees were on their phones at different times, including not paying attention to what was happening. These individuals are elected to represent the public for their communities and should be paying attention and engaged at all times. So within this video, it's going to be hard to cover everything that happened, so I'm going to go over some of the big points that I found. Obviously, the biggest issue is the budget right now, which was going to have a shortfall of $67.8 million next year. I think it's important to notice that support services and spec ed staff were not reduced, and even though these areas should be probably growing in funding and support, it's a positive with all this change that there wasn't a reduction. Another interesting thing was the transport budget is going to be reduced by $5.7 million. But one thing that was shocking was that transporting a TDSB student is double the cost of transporting a TDCSB student, which is the Catholic School Board of Toronto. A possibility for this that they said was that TDSB is subsidizing transport for some TDCSB students, but still double the cost per average student is very surprising, and there should be more information as to why this is occurring. There was a lot discussed about other cultures and in relation to other cultures and them being represented, which was nice to see, including Asian Heritage Month and Jewish Heritage Month. There will also be a Stories of Spadina walking tour through Kensington Market next year, which focuses on stories from early Jewish communities, as well as a festival in 2020 recognizing different genocides that occurred, which will include the treatment of First Nations people in this country, which was previously considered a cultural genocide, but now it's being considered an actual genocide, which is a sticky topic for some people, but I think it's not a bad thing for it to be seen as so problematic instead of this other cultural genocide option. Another hot topic, which always seems to be present in schools, was the dress code. So there was a trustee named Trustee Tonks who put forth a motion to alter the voting for student dress code. Basically, grade 7s wouldn't be allowed to vote. Grade 7s and under couldn't vote, and only their parents could speak for them. This was a huge issue in my opinion because he was taking the classic approach that adults know best, and we should not listen to students and not let them speak about their own issues. The students are more than capable of making decisions on something like the dress code, which determines a large part of their identity and how they're seen. Even if you take the vote away from students, they're still going to find ways to get around the code and push the boundaries, perhaps even more so because of their voices not being heard. Thankfully, this motion was squashed pretty huge. I think only 2 people voted yes. And now there's, quite a big change coming to the dress code, which is interesting to see. One last thing I find interesting involved the school council having parents' emails. So basically a list of the parents' emails so that they can contact them directly in regards to what happens in meetings and decisions that are made. There's a lot of legal complications with this due to trust and security potentially being broken. So what happens if a hack occurs and information is leaked? Who would be held responsible? What would be the ramifications going forward? There are also other issues involved, like who would be in charge of the list and answer the emails that parents send. The board wants the power of having the list, but wants nothing to do with answering those emails or making the list, and would rather have, they want administration to be the people who are involved in that, which I think is ridiculous. If you want this list, you should have someone in charge of it, creating it, being responsible for it. But it goes to show that something as simple as making an email list can have a lot of complications and be problematic in this environment. Personally, I don't watch the news that often, so you can learn a lot of things that you had no clue occurred in, outside of your bubble or whatever, in the education world by attending these meetings. As an example, there were 2 fires that ruined 2 schools in recent weeks, one of which is actually quite close to my house, and I had no clue either of these happened until hearing about them. In general, these meetings are excellent sources of information on a wide variety of topics related to my future career that I will need to be mindful of and attend more in the future. It's interesting to see how much the government affects the proceedings based on things like the budget. As we learned in our readings, most of that area is largely controlled by the provincial government, and it has this freezing effect on what the board can do to try and solve problems or make plans going into next year. Seeing a board meeting in person happening was an eye-opening experience, especially in this time of uncertainty going forward with massive potential changes. It's great to see some things that are happening and get the ins and outs of how some decisions are made, but at the same time, we still need more answers on a lot of issues going forward, especially in regards to the budget with time running out.